When she showed up at his door at midnight, mascara streaked down her cheeks and a suitcase in her trembling hand, Marcus Wheeler had no idea that everything he had spent 5 years carefully holding together was about to come undone in the most beautiful way imaginable. But we will get to that moment. First, you need to understand who Marcus was before that knock changed his life forever. You need to understand the quiet war he fought every single day, the love he carried like a weight across his shoulders, and the one person who made all of it feel just a little bit lighter. Marcus Wheeler was 38 years old, and he had not slept past 6 in the morning in over 4 years, not once. His alarm was set for 5:45, but his body never needed it. Something deeper than habit woke him, something carved into his bones by the relentless rhythm of single fatherhood. Every morning began the same way. Feet on the cold hardwood floor, a deep breath drawn in through his nose, the smell of last night's dish soap still lingering from the kitchen. Then movement. Always movement. Because if Marcus stopped moving, even for a moment, the weight of everything might finally pin him down. His daughter Lily was 7. She had her mother's dark curls and her father's stubborn jaw, and she carried a stuffed rabbit named Captain Biscuit everywhere she went, even to school, tucked inside her backpack where the teachers pretended not to notice. Lily was the reason Marcus woke up. She was the reason he kept the house clean, kept the refrigerator stocked, kept showing up to his job at the furniture restoration shop even on days when his back ached so badly he could barely lift a sanding block. She was the reason for all of it. Every single bit. Her mother, Janine, had left when Lily was 3. There was no dramatic confrontation. No thrown plates or screaming matches in the driveway. Just a note on the kitchen counter one Tuesday morning, written on the back of a grocery receipt. 3 sentences. She was not happy. She was sorry. She hoped he would understand someday. Marcus never did understand. He probably never would. But he folded that receipt into a small square and tucked it into the back of his sock drawer, not because he wanted to remember, but because throwing it away felt like admitting that 7 years of his life had meant nothing at all. The first year alone was the hardest. Lily cried for her mother every night for 3 months straight. Marcus would sit on the edge of her tiny bed, rubbing her back in slow circles, whispering things he was not sure he believed. "Mama loves you. Everything is going to be okay. You are safe." He said those words so many times they became smooth and hollow, like river stones worn down by water. But he kept saying them because that is what fathers do. They say the thing their child needs to hear, even when their own heart is breaking in half. By the 2nd year, Marcus had developed a system. Mornings were for Lily, packing her lunch, braiding her hair, which he had learned from a woman's tutorial on his phone, replaying the same video 40 times until his thick fingers could manage something that resembled a French braid, walking her to the bus stop at the corner of Maple and Division, where he would crouch down to her height and press his forehead against hers. Their little ritual, their private language. "Be brave today," he would say. "Be brave today, Daddy," she would echo back. And then the bus would swallow her up, and Marcus would stand there on the sidewalk, hands in his jacket pockets, watching until the yellow disappeared around the bend. The days were for work. The furniture shop was a 20-minute drive across town, a small cluttered space that smelled of linseed oil and cedar shavings. Marcus was good with his hands. He could take a broken chair, something most people would leave on the curb for trash collection, and turn it into something beautiful again. There was a kind of prayer in that work, a meditation. He would run his palm across a damaged tabletop and feel where the wood had splintered, where time and neglect had worn it thin, and he would know exactly what it needed. Patience, care, the right pressure in the right places. He sometimes thought he understood furniture better than he understood people. Furniture never left a note on the counter and walked away. Evenings were the longest. After dinner and homework and bath time and the slow negotiation of bedtime, Marcus would finally sink into the couch with the house quiet around him. The television would be on, volume low, casting blue light across the living room. But he rarely watched. He just sat there, existing, feeling the emptiness of the house press in around him like water filling a sinking boat. He was not lonely in the way people talk about loneliness, not the sharp, desperate kind. His was duller, deeper, a low hum that never quite stopped, the feeling of being surrounded by silence that should have been filled by another voice, another laugh, another person asking how his day was and actually wanting to hear the answer. He had friends. A few guys from the shop. A couple of dads from Lily's school who would nod at him during pickup. But Marcus was not the type to reach out. He had built walls around himself without even realizing it. Tall and smooth and nearly invisible, the kind that look like independence from the outside, but feel like isolation from within. He told himself he was fine. He told himself he had everything he needed. Lily was healthy. The bills were paid, mostly on time. The roof did not leak. What more could a man ask for? And then there was Claire. Claire Donovan had come into his life so gradually that Marcus could never pinpoint the exact moment she became essential to him. She was a friend of a friend at first, someone he met at a neighborhood barbecue the summer after Janine left. She had shown up with a bowl of potato salad and a laugh that carried across the yard like music, and Marcus had noticed her the way you notice sunlight after a long stretch of gray sky. Not with intention, just with relief. She was 35, with auburn hair that she usually wore pulled back in a loose knot, and green eyes that always seemed to be paying attention. Really paying attention, in a way that most people never do. She worked as a reading specialist at the elementary school 2 blocks from Lily's, and she had a gift for listening that bordered on supernatural. When Claire looked at you during a conversation, you felt like the only person alive. She did not check her phone. She did not glance over your shoulder. She leaned in. She nodded. She asked the follow-up question that proved she had actually heard every word. Their friendship grew slowly, the way the best ones always do. It started with casual conversations at neighborhood gatherings, then progressed to the occasional coffee when they bumped into each other at the cafe on Birch Street. Claire loved black coffee with 1 sugar. Marcus drank his with too much cream, something she teased him about endlessly. "You are not drinking coffee," she would say, grinning over the rim of her mug. "You are drinking coffee, flavored milk." And he would laugh, really laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep in his chest, a sound he sometimes did not recognize because he heard it so rarely. Within a year, Claire had become woven into the fabric of their daily life in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. She started coming over on Sunday afternoons to help Lily with her reading. She would sit cross-legged on the living room floor with Lily in her lap. The two of them bent over a picture book, Claire's finger tracing the words while Lily sounded them out slowly. Captain Biscuit always sat between them, propped up against a cushion like a third member of the reading circle. Marcus would watch from the kitchen doorway, dish towel slung over his shoulder, and feel something warm bloom behind his ribs, something he did not dare name. Claire remembered things. That was what got to him the most. She remembered that Lily was afraid of thunderstorms, so she bought her a small nightlight shaped like a star and dropped it off one evening without making a big deal about it. She remembered that Marcus had mentioned his truck needed new brake pads, and she texted him the name of a mechanic her brother trusted. She remembered that he liked lemon cake, and on his birthday she showed up at the shop with one she had baked herself, the frosting slightly lopsided, a single candle stuck in the center. "Make a wish," she said, holding it out with both hands. He looked at her face in the glow of that small flame and thought, "I do not need to." But Marcus kept his distance. Not physically. Physically, Claire was everywhere. She was at the school pickup line, waving at Lily through the window. She was at his kitchen table on Wednesday nights, grading papers while he cooked dinner, the two of them sharing a comfortable silence that felt more intimate than any conversation. She was at the end of his phone every evening, her name lighting up his screen with some funny observation about her day or a question about Lily. But emotionally, Marcus held a line. A careful, deliberate line that he never crossed and never acknowledged, because Claire was his friend. his best friend. And Marcus could not afford to lose another person he loved. Not again. He told himself the warmth he felt when she walked into a room was gratitude. He told himself the way his chest tightened when she laughed was just appreciation for the sound. He told himself that the reason he shaved more carefully on days he knew he would see her was simply self-respect. These were small lies, harmless ones, the kind a man tells himself when the truth is too terrifying to face. And Marcus was very good at small lies. He had been practicing them since the morning he found that note on the counter. Claire, for her part, gave no obvious sign that she wanted anything more than what they had. She was warm but careful, affectionate but measured. She would touch his arm when she talked to him, a brief press of her fingers against his sleeve, but she always pulled away quickly, as if she had touched something hot. She would hold his gaze a beat too long sometimes, her green eyes searching his face for something she never quite asked about, and then she would blink and look away and change the subject to something safe. The weather. A book she was reading. Whether Lily needed new shoes. There were moments, though. Moments that hung in the air between them like notes of a song neither of them would sing. One evening, they were sitting on his back porch watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. The sky was purple and gold, and the air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. Claire was sitting close enough that Marcus could smell her shampoo, something clean and faintly sweet, like vanilla and rain. Lily caught a firefly in her cupped hands and ran toward them, breathless, her face lit up with wonder. "Look," she cried. "Look, it is glowing." Claire leaned forward and peered into Lily's hands, and her shoulder pressed against Marcus's arm. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. The firefly pulsed its tiny light between Lily's fingers, and Marcus felt his heart doing something very similar inside his chest. Then Lily ran off again, and Claire straightened up, and the moment passed like a cloud crossing the sun. But Marcus felt the ghost of her shoulder against his arm for the rest of the night. He lay in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, and pressed his hand against the spot where she had touched him, as if he could hold the warmth there. As if he could keep it. He was not the only one lying awake. Across town, in her small apartment above the bookstore on Cedar Avenue, Claire Donovan sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she was not drinking and stared at her phone. Marcus's name was on the screen. Their last exchange, a simple goodnight text. 2 words from him, 2 words from her, and yet she had read them 4 times already. She set the phone face down on the table and pressed her palms against her eyes. This was not supposed to happen. He was her friend. Her dearest, closest, most important friend. And she was not going to be the woman who ruined that. She was not going to be the one who reached across that careful distance and shattered the only good and stable thing in both their lives. But the feelings were there. They had been there for longer than she wanted to admit, growing quietly in the spaces between their conversations, taking root in the silences, fed by every shared glance and accidental touch and late-night phone call that lasted just a few minutes longer than it needed to. She felt it when he opened the door and his face changed at the sight of her, that brief unguarded flash of something raw and real before he composed himself and smiled his careful smile. She felt it when he said her name, the way his voice dropped half a register, as if the word itself was something precious he was handling gently. She felt it like a tide pulling at her ankles, patient and relentless, and she was terrified of what would happen if she stopped resisting. Claire's life, from the outside, appeared perfectly assembled. She had a job she loved, a cozy apartment filled with books and soft lamplight, a circle of colleagues who respected her, and a standing Saturday morning yoga class that she rarely missed. But underneath that tidy surface, things were quietly coming apart. Her relationship with David, the man she had been dating for 2 years, had been deteriorating for months. David was an account manager at a marketing firm, polished and precise, the kind of man who ironed his jeans and scheduled their dates in his calendar app with color-coded labels. He was not unkind. He was simply absent, present in body but unreachable in every way that mattered. Their conversations had become transactional. Their silences had lost their comfort. Claire would sit across from him at dinner and feel a loneliness so acute it almost took her breath away, a loneliness far worse than being alone, because it came wrapped in the pretense of companionship. She had tried to talk to him. Several times. She would begin carefully, choosing her words the way she chose words for her struggling readers, with patience and precision. David, I feel like we are drifting. David, I need more from this. David, are you happy? And every time, he would look at her with a faintly puzzled expression, as if she were speaking a language he had once known but had since forgotten. I think we are fine, he would say. I do not know what you are looking for. And then he would check his phone, and the conversation would be over, and Claire would feel something inside her close like a door. She had not told Marcus about the trouble with David. Not really. She mentioned small things in passing, the kind of vague complaints that could be laughed off. David forgot our anniversary again. David had to cancel dinner for a work thing. She delivered these updates with a shrug and a half smile that Marcus always saw right through but never challenged. He would just look at her with those steady brown eyes, and she could see the question he was not asking, and she loved him for not asking it. She loved him for knowing that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them come to the truth in their own time. But the truth was getting harder to outrun, because every hour she spent in Marcus's kitchen, every Sunday afternoon on his living room floor with Lily in her lap, every firefly evening on that back porch, the contrast between what she had and what she wanted grew sharper and more painful. David gave her stability. Marcus gave her belonging. David made plans. Marcus made her feel seen. And the distance between those two things was becoming a canyon she could no longer pretend was just a crack in the sidewalk. She did not know that the fracture was about to split wide open. She did not know that in a matter of weeks, the careful architecture of her life would collapse in a single evening, and she would find herself standing on Marcus's porch at midnight with nothing but a suitcase and the terrifying, exhilarating, unbearable truth she had been carrying for longer than she could remember. That knock was coming, and when it came, nothing would ever be the same. It was a Tuesday in late October when everything changed. The air had turned sharp with the first real cold of autumn, and the trees along Marcus's street had gone gold and crimson, their leaves drifting down like slow confetti. Marcus had put Lily to bed an hour earlier. She had fallen asleep mid-sentence, the way children do, her voice trailing off as Captain Biscuit slipped from her fingers onto the pillow beside her. He had pulled the blanket up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and whispered their words. Be brave today, even though the day was already over. Even though she was already dreaming. He said it anyway, because the ritual mattered more than the timing. He was downstairs washing the last of the dinner dishes when he heard it. A knock not loud, not urgent, almost hesitant. 3 soft taps against the front door that sounded, in the stillness of the house, like a heartbeat. Marcus dried his hands on the dish towel and glanced at the clock on the microwave. 11:53. His chest tightened with the instinctive alarm of a parent hearing an unexpected sound in the night. He crossed the living room in 4 strides and opened the door. Claire stood on the porch. Her coat was unbuttoned despite the cold. Her auburn hair was down, falling around her face in loose tangles, and her eyes were red and swollen in a way that made Marcus's stomach drop. There was a suitcase beside her. A small rolling bag, the kind she took on weekend trips. She was gripping the handle so tightly her knuckles were white. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cold air pushed past her into the warm house, carrying the smell of dead leaves and distant chimney smoke. A car passed on the street behind her, its headlights sweeping across the porch and then moving on, leaving them in the soft yellow glow of the porch light. "Can I stay over tonight?" she said. Her voice was small, smaller than he had ever heard it. She was not asking the way you ask a friend for a favor. She was asking the way you ask when you have nowhere else to go. When the question itself costs you something. Marcus did not ask what happened. He did not ask where David was, or why she had a suitcase, or why her hands were shaking. He simply stepped aside and held the door open wider, and Claire walked past him into the house, and the door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded, in that quiet hallway, like the turning of a page. He took her coat. He made her tea. He sat her down on the couch and draped the wool blanket from the armchair across her shoulders, the one Lily called the cozy blanket, the one that smelled like their fabric softener and home. Claire wrapped her hands around the mug and stared down into the tea, as if looking for answers in the steam. Marcus sat on the opposite end of the couch, close enough to reach her, far enough to give her room. He had always been good at that distance. The careful, calibrated distance of a man who loved someone he believed he had no right to love. They sat in silence for a long time. The house ticked and settled around them. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Lily murmured something in her sleep, a fragment of a dream drifting down through the floorboards like a feather. Then Claire spoke. She started slowly, haltingly, the words coming out in broken pieces like a mosaic she was assembling as she went. "David and I are done. It has been over for a long time, but tonight he finally said it out loud. He told me he had been seeing someone from his office. For 4 months. He was very calm about it, very organized. He had already divided up the apartment in his mind. He knew which furniture was his and which was mine. He had a spreadsheet." She laughed. A short, jagged sound that had no humor in it. "A spreadsheet, Marcus. He planned the end of our relationship the same way he planned everything else. With categories and color codes." Marcus said nothing. He just listened. The way Claire had always listened to him. With his whole body turned toward her. With his eyes steady on her face. With the kind of attention that says, "I am here, and I am not going anywhere." Claire set the mug down on the coffee table and pressed her fingers against her temples. "But that is not why I am crying," she said. "I am not crying because David left. I am crying because when he told me, the first thing I felt was relief, and the second thing I felt was guilt. Because the moment he said it was over, the only person I wanted to see was you." The words landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus felt them ripple through his body. He felt his breath catch. He felt the careful walls he had spent years building begin to tremble at their foundations. Claire turned to face him. Her eyes were wet, but her gaze was clear, blazing with a courage that terrified her even as she summoned it. "I need to say something," she said, "and I need you to let me say it before you respond. Because if I do not say it now, I never will, and I will spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had just been brave enough." Marcus nodded. His hands were gripping his knees. His heart was hammering against his ribs like something trying to break free. "I am in love with you," Claire said. "I have been in love with you for so long that I cannot remember what it felt like before. I love the way you are with Lily. I love the way you fix broken things and make them beautiful again. I love that you drink coffee that is mostly cream and that you cannot braid hair without watching that same video every single time. I love your Sunday mornings and your Wednesday dinners and the way you press your forehead against your daughter's before she gets on the bus. I love you, Marcus. Not as a friend. Not only as a friend. I love you in the way that keeps me awake at night. In the way that makes every other room feel empty when you are not in it." The silence that followed was enormous. It filled the room like a held breath. Marcus stared at her. His face was unreadable. His jaw was tight. His eyes glistened in the low lamplight, and for one terrible moment Claire thought she had made the worst mistake of her life. Then Marcus spoke. His voice was rough, scraped raw by the effort of holding back everything he had been holding back for years. "I am terrified," he said. "I am terrified because the last person I loved like this left me a note on the counter and disappeared. I am terrified because I have a little girl upstairs who has already lost one person, and I cannot let her lose another. I am terrified because you are the best thing in my life, and if this goes wrong I lose everything." He paused, swallowed hard, looked at the ceiling and then back at her. "But I am more terrified of never saying it. So here it is. I love you, Claire. I have loved you since the day you showed up at my shop with a lopsided lemon cake and a single candle and told me to make a wish. I did not need to make a wish, because you were already there. Claire's hand found his. Their fingers intertwined on the cushion between them. The touch was electric and tender at the same time, charged with years of restraint finally releasing, like a river breaking through a dam. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she was smiling, and Marcus was smiling too, a real smile, unguarded and wide and full of something that looked like sunrise. They did not kiss. Not yet. That would come later, in its own time, when the moment was ripe and unhurried. Instead, they sat together on that couch, hands clasped, shoulders touching, breathing in the quiet of a house that suddenly felt less empty. Less like a place where a man survived and more like a place where something new and brave and fragile was being born. Upstairs, Lily rolled over in her sleep and pulled Captain Biscuit closer. The star-shaped nightlight glowed softly on her bedside table, the one Claire had given her, casting tiny points of light across the ceiling like a constellation. In the morning, Lily would come downstairs and find Claire at the kitchen table, and she would climb into her lap without question or hesitation, because children understand belonging before adults ever find the courage to name it. And Marcus would stand in the doorway, dish towel over his shoulder, watching the two people he loved most in the world bent together over a bowl of cereal, and he would feel the last of his walls come down, not with a crash, with a whisper, like the softest exhale after the longest held breath. They would have hard conversations in the days ahead. They would talk about timing and boundaries, and what it means to build something real on the foundation of a friendship that had carried them both through their loneliest years. They would talk about Lily, always about Lily, because she was the center of everything, and any love that did not include her was not love worth having. Claire knew that. She had always known that. It was one of the reasons Marcus loved her. There would be a morning, 3 weeks later, when Claire would move the last of her boxes out of the apartment above the bookstore and into the small guest room at Marcus's house. Just temporary, they would tell themselves. Just until she found her own place. But they both knew, even as they said it, that she was already home. That she had been home every time she walked through his front door. That home was never about an address. It was about the person who opens the door and the look on their face when they see you standing there. And there would be an evening, 2 months after that, when Marcus would come home from the shop to find Claire and Lily on the living room floor, surrounded by picture books, Captain Biscuit propped up between them. Lily would look up and say, "Daddy, Claire says I read the best out of anyone she knows." And Claire would catch Marcus's eye over Lily's curly head, and the look that passed between them would hold everything. Every midnight knock, every held-back word, every firefly evening, every small, sacred, ordinary moment that had led them here. Marcus would crouch down beside them. He would press his forehead against Lily's. "Be brave today," he would say. "Be brave today, Daddy," she would echo. And then Lily would reach out and press her forehead against Claire's too, completing the circle. "Be brave today, Claire," she would whisper. And Claire would close her eyes and feel the tears come and think, yes, this is what courage feels like. Not the absence of fear. The decision to love anyway. The dish towel would be over his shoulder. The lemon cake recipe would be taped to the refrigerator. The star nightlight would glow upstairs, patient and steady, casting its small light across a ceiling that sheltered all three of them now. And the door that Claire had knocked on at midnight would remain open. Not because Marcus forgot to close it, but because some doors, once opened by love, are never meant to be shut again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the best love stories do not begin with perfection. They begin with a knock on the door and the courage to let someone in.